Okay then, Rosie, so you don't need me to do anything, so off you go.
Okay, so Paul was looking for speakers and I said, oh, I can talk about wills or I can talk about powers of attorney around businesses particularly. And Paul suggested powers of attorney. I guess most people know what a will is. Power of attorney is a little bit less well known. I always think it's more important because a power of attorney deals with what happens during your lifetime. A will only kicks in after you've passed away. So from your own personal selfish nature, you don't really care about your will because you won't be here anymore. Your power of attorney, however, has a direct impact. And very simply, what a power of attorney does is it's a legal document to give somebody else the authority to deal with your affairs. About 15 years ago, the rules changed. Before that, you had a lovely bit of paper, 4 sides of paper, and you could give away authority over all your finances for the rest of your life. House, bank accounts, money, everything. Unfortunately, perhaps unsurprisingly, these were widely abused, and so they introduced what were called lasting powers of attorney. The concept is the same. They will still last for the rest of your life, but they're much more comprehensive and they have more safeguards built into them. There are 2 types. One deals with property and finance and one deals with health and welfare. As individuals, I would encourage you all to do both of them. The finance one is fairly self-evident. If you can't manage your own bank account, you need somebody to pay the bills, you need somebody to sell the house if you need to talk to Heather and Val on your behalf when they've made a mistake. Not that they ever would, but you know, when there's an issue with the bills, all those sorts of things, powers of attorney are for. Health and welfare is a bit like an insurance policy. If you keep your capacity for all of your lifetime, you will never need it. But if you lose capacity, it will be absolutely invaluable. Whether that loss of capacity is temporary or permanent, it gives somebody else the authority to make decisions about your health and welfare on your behalf. Hugely important, but not really what I'm here to talk about today. What I'm talking about today is particularly how powers of attorney interact with your business. We work as small business owners. We work really hard establishing our business, and we probably put in far more hours than we should. We talked about a work-life balance earlier, I think it was Elaine, and we work so hard to make sure that the business runs smoothly and it's a success. But very rarely do people give consideration to what happens if they're incapacitated. You might have done a will, you might have thought about, you hopefully thought about your business in terms of your will, but in terms of incapacity, we work so hard to build up our business. If we then lose capacity, even temporarily, and COVID has been a horrific example of this, of people who have been temporarily very incapacitated, thankfully gone on to make a full recovery. But what happens to your business while you're incapacitated? And that is the point of a power of attorney. And you can do a specific one for your business, and you need to think about who the right person is. So using me as an example, from obviously my private affairs, my husband is my power of attorney. My husband is a musician. His knowledge of wills is pretty much non-existent, although he does make a very good second witness. So if I lose capacity and the responsibility falls to him to deal with my clients, that's not a good plan. That's not me protecting my business, and the chance of my business still being there when I am recovering capacity is slim. So you need to identify the right person, and it needs to be somebody who understands your business and can keep it going temporarily until you're back on your feet, or if necessary, wind it up or deal with it permanently. So the first thing you have to do is to think about your own business. And it makes a difference. If you're like me, a sole trader, I mean, I'm a limited company, but it's me. If I'm not here, the business ends. So for me, a temporary loss of capacity, I need somebody to just tick things over, keep reassuring the clients, tell them everything will be dealt with. A longer term loss of capacity, I need somebody to be able to, so because I'm a member of society, they would take over and they would finish my files. So I need somebody to contact them. But I also need somebody to finish off my finances, to do my tax returns, to update company's house, all those sorts of things. So you've got to pick the right person. But actually, as an individual, those are relatively understandable decisions. You know what's got to be done. So you choose the right person, and you make sure you leave them instructions about what needs to happen. You know, what they need to do, in my case, is contact the right people. They need to contact the Society of Will Writers to get the clients resolved. They need to contact the accountant to get the tax resolved, those sorts of things. So you need to leave them instructions, because how are they supposed to know? If your business is slightly bigger and involves more people, then it becomes more complicated, particularly if you are in a partnership of some description. By partnership, I just mean more than one person. So if you work jointly, whether that's as a company or as a joint enterprise or as a partnership, you need to think about what happens, A, if you lose capacity, but also what happens if your partner loses capacity. So imagine now I'm in business with my friend who does exactly the same as me, and we jointly see clients and we jointly share the profit. If I lose capacity, and my husband is my attorney, my friend is now in business with my husband effectively. That's going to go well, isn't it? And am I going to get paid? Does my business partner have to do all the work and still give me half of the profits, even though I'm not there and I'm not contributing? And how long does that run on for? These are the sorts of things that you have to think about. Once you've thought about it, you can make a plan. So the problem with incapacity is it is unknown, and often the length of time is unknown. So if I was incapacitated for a couple of weeks, I would expect my business partner to pick up the slack and run with it for me. My hypothetical business partner, you understand. If, however, my incapacity is going to be longer term and it's going to be 18 months of recovery, is it really fair to expect my business partner to manage everything on her own and still pay me? And you can think of that at the flip side. If my business partner is incapacitated for 18 months, do I really want to have to run everything on my own, so do double the work, but still have to give her half the money? I will probably find that I need to employ somebody, but who's going to pay for that? Does that come from her share of the profits? But if we've got an agreement that she just gets half the profits, these are the sorts of problems that can arise. And it's very difficult to address them in those circumstances. If you leave it until your business partner becomes incapacitated, then it's just in a horrible position, because they're in a really difficult position, and you know they are. So you may well feel morally obliged to carry on, but drive yourself into the ground doing it. So it is much better to think of these things beforehand. And although they're hopefully very unlikely to happen, the consequences can be catastrophic. So it's one of those things you need to plan for. And the planning begins with thinking about it. What would happen if I lost capacity? Practically, what would happen? And then you need to put the paperwork in place to give the right people the authority. You need to find somebody who would be prepared to do it. And then you need to put your power of attorney in place so that it does it properly. You do need to be a little bit careful, because equally you probably don't want the business partner having authority over your personal finances. So thankfully you can do separate ones. It may be that the same person does both. You know, if you're in partnership with your husband or, you know, best friend or sister or whatever, it might be that actually they are the right person to do both personal and business finance. But that's, I would suggest, unusual. It's quite often better to have separate and distinct powers of attorney with clear lines of division, not least because we're talking about an incapacity, and that incapacity is usually caused by a medical crisis. And my husband, I hope, will be concentrating on looking after me, and I don't really want him to be worrying about the business. So divvying up the responsibility is quite sensible practically. As part and parcel of thinking about this, you do need to think about whether you need a partnership agreement, whether you need a shareholders agreement, and most importantly, whether you need some kind of insurance in place to pay for this crisis if it happens. I can't help you with any of those things. They're just things that you need to think about, but I'm sure BizCom members, there are people that can do all of those things. But you need to think about it all together. So the point from today, which hopefully you've picked up, and obviously I'll ask any questions, is just to think about this business that you've worked so hard to create. What happens to it if you are incapacitated, and you just need to make sure you're putting the paperwork in place so that it can be resolved smoothly and it doesn't make a really difficult decision, a really difficult time, worse. We all like to hope it won't happen, but are you really willing to gamble your business on a hope? So hopefully, lots of hoping there. I think that's about 10 minutes and I feel like I should stop waffling.
It is perfectly 10 minutes. It's 7 seconds off 10 minutes. So excellent. Very impressive. Thank you. That was really interesting, because I had thought about what would happen to my business, and particularly about my clients, you know, who would be left hanging. But I hadn't even contemplated doing a power of attorney for the business. So thank you. Questions, just raise your hands. I can see you all. Okay, Jackie, I think you went up first.
Yes, it's a general one about lasting power of attorney, but it applies to business as well. We had a circumstance where we got a lasting power of attorney from my husband's mother, and my husband would be the power of attorney. But that assumes that his mum's got Alzheimer's, right? Which was fine until my husband got ill. And then the chances are now that his mother will outlive him, but we have no way of getting another power of attorney. So having the right expertise to think through all the contingencies around the circumstances is something that I learned out of that lesson. That you really need someone who understands how this whole thing works and can think of all the other things that come into play, isn't it? It's like you're talking about the insurance and all the other stuff, but it's kind of getting it set up properly.
Yeah, and the powers of attorney, they do have the flexibility to include more than one and to include replacements, but they are forms to fill in. So lots of people think, oh, I can do this myself. And you're absolutely right, you can. There's loads of guidance on there about it available online. But your problem is you won't know whether you've done it, whether you've covered that scenario. I generally don't.
Yeah.
I don't let clients just appoint one attorney because that is too big a risk. But you wouldn't know that as a person. You think, obviously, I'm going to outlive my mother. There only needs to be me. We don't worry about it. So it's as Jackie says, it's that advice that it is worth, in my view. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? It's worth getting specialist advice on.
Well, thank you, Rosie. That stimulated quite a lot of interest. And yeah, for me personally, having done the other two, I didn't even, and talked to somebody about what's going to happen to my clients, it didn't even dawn on me to do the business bit. Just assumed, I suppose as I'm a sole trader, I just assumed that came into the personal bit.
It does. It absolutely does. The one you've got will cover your business. It's just whether that's the right
enough thing. Yes, okay, I shall have a think and maybe a chat.